One of the most challenging realities of faith is accepting that God does not always answer our prayers in the way we expect. When something valuable leaves our lives, whether it is a relationship, an opportunity, a season of happiness, or a dream we cherished, our natural instinct is to ask God to bring it back. We imagine that restoration means returning to what once was. We convince ourselves that if things could simply go back to the way they were, our hearts would finally be at peace. Yet God often works according to a much greater vision. While we are looking backward, He is looking forward. While we are asking for the return of something familiar, He is preparing something beyond our imagination. The difficulty is that God's plans rarely reveal themselves all at once. They unfold gradually, requiring trust during the periods when understanding is unavailable. Many people spend years emotionally anchored to the past. They revisit old conversations. They replay memories. They imagine different outcomes. They hold on to the belief that if a particular person returns or a certain situation changes, then life will finally feel complete. Without realizing it, they place their future on hold while waiting for yesterday to reappear. The problem with this mindset is not that the past was without value. The past may have contained genuine blessings, meaningful relationships, and important lessons. The problem arises when we assume that God's greatest work has already happened. We begin treating former seasons as though they represent the highest point we will ever experience. We stop expecting God to do something new because we become obsessed with recovering something old. God is not the God of stagnation. He is constantly working, constantly leading, constantly creating opportunities that move His children forward. Throughout life, He often calls people away from what is comfortable so they can experience what is greater. The challenge is that greater things frequently begin with uncomfortable transitions. Consider how often God leads people through endings before introducing new beginnings. A door closes, a chapter ends, a relationship changes, a familiar season disappears. At first, these moments feel confusing and painful. They create uncertainty. They raise questions. Yet many times, these endings are not evidence that God has abandoned His plans. They are evidence that His plans are progressing. Human beings naturally resist change because change requires faith. Familiarity offers a sense of control. Even imperfect situations can feel safer than unknown possibilities. This is why many people cling tightly to the past. The past may no longer serve God's purpose for their lives, but at least it is familiar. Faith, however, invites us into a different way of living. Faith asks us to trust God's wisdom more than our preferences. It asks us to believe that His plans are better than our assumptions. It challenges us to release what we can see and trust what we cannot yet see. Sometimes people interpret loss as evidence of failure. They assume that because something ended, it must have been outside God's will. Yet many of life's greatest blessings begin with experiences that initially resemble loss. A closed door can redirect someone toward their true purpose. A disappointment can prevent a greater disappointment. A painful separation can create space for future growth. God often protects people through circumstances they do not immediately understand. What feels like rejection may actually be protection. What seems like delay may actually be preparation. What appears to be an ending may simply be a transition into a new chapter. One reason this truth is difficult to accept is because human beings tend to attach their hopes to specific outcomes. We create detailed expectations for how our lives should unfold. We decide who should remain in our story. We determine what opportunities should succeed. We imagine how God should answer our prayers. Then, when reality unfolds differently, disappointment follows. Yet God sees details we cannot see. He understands consequences we cannot predict. He knows what lies ahead. His perspective is not limited by time, emotions, or incomplete information. Because his perspective is greater, his plans are often greater as well. There are moments when a person may indeed return. Relationships can be restored. Reconciliation can occur. Doors can reopen. God is certainly capable of bringing people back into our lives. But even when restoration happens, it is important to remember that our ultimate hope must remain in God rather than in any specific person or circumstance. The danger of focusing exclusively on restoration is that it can cause us to overlook transformation. Restoration returns something to a previous condition. Transformation creates something new. Often God is more interested in transformation than simple restoration. He wants to strengthen character, deepen faith, increase wisdom, and expand spiritual maturity. If God simply returned everything exactly as it was, many people would never experience the growth necessary for their future. Challenges develop endurance. Waiting develops trust. Disappointments develop dependence upon God. Difficult seasons shape qualities that comfortable seasons rarely produce. Looking back across life, many people eventually recognize that some of their greatest blessings arrive disguised as setbacks. Opportunities they desperately wanted never materialized, only for something better to appear later. Relationships they thought were essential ended, only for healthier connections to emerge. Dreams they pursued collapsed, only for greater purposes to unfold. This pattern reveals something profound about God's nature. He is not merely concerned with giving people what they want. He is committed to leading them toward what is best. Because of this, his answers sometimes differ from their requests. The future God prepares is often larger than the future we imagine. We think in terms of immediate desires. He thinks in terms of eternal purposes. We focus on current emotions. He focuses on lasting growth. We concentrate on temporary circumstances. He concentrates on ultimate outcomes. When believers truly understand this, they begin living with greater peace. They stop obsessing over every closed door. They stop measuring God's faithfulness by temporary disappointments. They stop assuming that every loss is permanent. Instead, they begin trusting that God remains active even when circumstances appear uncertain. This trust creates freedom. It frees people from desperation. It frees them from constantly chasing what has already ended. It frees them from believing that one person, one opportunity, or one season holds the key to their happiness. They realize that God is the source of every good thing, and that his ability to bless them is not limited by what has already passed. The future remains secure because it rests in his hands. His plans remain intact regardless of human decisions. His purposes continue moving forward regardless of temporary setbacks. What has ended does not define what is possible. What has been lost does not determine what can be gained. What once was does not establish the limits of what God can still do. The God who guided every previous chapter is already preparing chapters that have not yet been written, opportunities that have not yet appeared, and blessings that have not yet been imagined. One of the most painful experiences a person can face is watching something important leave their life. It may be a relationship that once seemed unshakable, an opportunity that appeared promising, a friendship that brought comfort, or a season that felt filled with purpose and joy. Whatever the loss may be, the departure often leaves behind questions that seem impossible to answer. Why did it happen? What could have been done differently? Will things ever be the same again? The human heart has a tendency to measure its future by its losses. When something valuable disappears, many people unconsciously begin to believe that their best days disappeared with it. They convince themselves that what was lost cannot be replaced. They imagine that certain blessings were tied exclusively to a particular person, situation, or opportunity. As a result, they begin living as though their future has been diminished. Yet one of the most liberating truths of faith is that what leaves your life does not have the authority to determine God's plans for your future. Human departures do not cancel divine purposes. Closed doors do not invalidate God's promises. Losses do not diminish His ability to bless, restore, guide, and provide. People often underestimate how much power they give to past events. A broken relationship can shape their expectations for future relationships. A failed opportunity can influence how they view future opportunities. A season of disappointment can create a mindset of permanent discouragement. Without realizing it, they begin allowing previous experiences to define future possibilities. God never intended His children to live this way. He never intended them to become prisoners of their past. While the past contains valuable lessons, it was never designed to become the foundation of their identity or their hope. Their hope is meant to rest in Him, not in circumstances that have already passed. One reason losses feel so devastating is because people often confuse God's gifts with God Himself. They become attached to the blessing and forget the source of the blessing. They place confidence in the relationship, the opportunity, the position, or the season, rather than in the God who provided it. When that blessing disappears, fear quickly follows. If this is gone, what will happen now? If this person never returns, what does the future hold? If this opportunity never comes back, how will things work out? These questions are understandable, but they reveal an important truth. They reveal where trust has been placed. If hope depends entirely upon a specific outcome, then peace becomes fragile. But when hope depends upon God, peace remains possible even during uncertainty. God's ability to provide is not dependent upon one individual. His ability to guide is not limited by one circumstance. His ability to bless is not restricted by one opportunity. He possesses countless ways to accomplish His purposes. The difficulty is that people often focus on visible losses while remaining unaware of invisible possibilities. They see the door that closed, but they cannot yet see the doors that are being prepared. They see the chapter that ended, but they cannot yet see the chapter that is beginning. Because they cannot see it, they assume it does not exist. Faith requires a different perspective. Faith believes that God's activity continues even when evidence is not immediately visible. Faith trusts that divine preparation is taking place behind the scenes. Faith understands that God's plans do not stop simply because human plans change. Throughout life, there will be moments when certain things must leave before better things can arrive. This principle appears repeatedly in nature. Trees release old leaves before new growth emerges. Seeds disappear beneath the soil before producing fruit. Seasons change before harvests appear. What initially looks like loss often becomes the beginning of renewal. The same principle frequently applies to human experiences. Certain relationships end because they have fulfilled their purpose. Certain opportunities disappear because they are no longer aligned with God's direction. Certain seasons conclude because new seasons must begin. These transitions are not always easy, but they are often necessary. Many people look back on painful chapters years later and realize that what they once viewed as a tragedy was actually a turning point. The relationship that ended led them toward greater maturity. The opportunity that disappeared opened the door to something better. The disappointment they feared eventually became part of a larger blessing. At the time, however, those outcomes were impossible to see. This is why trust is so important. Trust allows people to move forward even when understanding is incomplete. It allows them to believe that God's wisdom exceeds their own. One of the enemy's favorite tactics is convincing people that their losses define them. He wants them to believe they are permanently damaged by what happened. He wants them to assume that future blessings are impossible because past blessings disappeared. He wants them to focus so heavily on what left that they become blind to what remains. Yet what remains is often far more significant than what departed. God's presence remains, His promises remain, His love remains, His faithfulness remains, His purpose remains. These realities provide a foundation that no loss can destroy. People may leave, circumstances may change, opportunities may vanish, seasons may end, but God remains constant. His commitment to His children does not fluctuate with circumstances. His plans are not abandoned because unexpected events occur. When believers truly embrace this truth, they begin approaching life differently. They stop treating every loss as a final verdict. They stop assuming that closed doors represent permanent defeat. They stop measuring their future according to past disappointments. Instead, they begin expecting God to work in new ways. They become open to unexpected opportunities. They become willing to release old attachments. They develop confidence that God's purposes are larger than any single experience. This confidence creates freedom. It allows people to appreciate the past without becoming trapped by it. It allows them to grieve losses without losing hope. It allows them to trust God's future without fully understanding it. The remarkable thing about God's plans is that they often emerge from situations that appeared hopeless. Again and again, He demonstrates His ability to bring beauty from brokenness, purpose from pain, and opportunity from disappointment. He takes circumstances that seem final and reveals that they were only temporary. What left your life may have mattered deeply. The loss may have been real. The disappointment may have been painful. The questions may still remain unanswered. Yet none of those realities possess the authority to determine your future. They cannot overrule God's purpose. They cannot cancel His promises. They cannot prevent His plans from unfolding. The story of your life is not being written by what left. It is being written by the God who remains. And the God who remains possesses unlimited wisdom, unlimited power, and unlimited ability to create possibilities where none appear to exist. What disappeared may occupy your memory, but it does not control your destiny. What ended may belong to a previous chapter, but it does not determine the chapters that God has yet to write. One of the greatest limitations of human beings is that they can only see a small portion of their story at any given moment. We make plans based on present information. We form expectations according to current circumstances. We imagine future outcomes using the knowledge available to us today. Yet no matter how intelligent, experienced, or thoughtful a person may be, their perspective remains limited. They cannot see tomorrow. They cannot predict every consequence. They cannot fully understand how present events connect to future purposes. God, however, sees what we cannot see. He stands outside the limitations of time. He understands every detail of every circumstance. He knows how today's confusion connects to tomorrow's blessing. He sees how present disappointments can become future victories. Because His vision is complete while ours is partial, His plans often surpass our expectations in ways we could never imagine. Many people approach God with carefully constructed ideas about how their lives should unfold. They determine what opportunities should succeed, which relationships should last, and what blessings should arrive. Then they ask God to fit His will into those expectations. When circumstances unfold differently, they often feel disappointed or confused. The challenge is that human expectations are frequently too small. We ask God to accomplish what we can imagine, while He desires to accomplish what we cannot imagine. We focus on immediate desires, while He focuses on eternal purposes. We seek comfort, while He develops character. We pursue convenience, while He prepares destiny. This difference in perspective explains why God's plans sometimes appear puzzling. There are seasons when events unfold in ways that seem contrary to our hopes. Doors close unexpectedly. Opportunities disappear. Relationships change. Prayers appear unanswered. During such moments, it becomes tempting to believe that God is withholding something good. Yet what appears to be withholding may actually be protection. What seems like delay may actually be preparation. What feels like disappointment may actually be divine direction. One reason people struggle with this truth is because they often evaluate God's faithfulness according to immediate results. If things happen quickly, they feel encouraged. If answers arrive slowly, they feel discouraged. If circumstances improve, they feel hopeful. If difficulties persist, they begin questioning. But God's faithfulness cannot be measured by temporary circumstances. His faithfulness is rooted in His character. Circumstances change. Emotions fluctuate. Seasons come and go. God's nature remains constant. He is wise when we are confused. He is faithful when we are uncertain. He is working when we cannot see evidence of His activity. There is a remarkable pattern throughout life. Many of the blessings people cherish most were blessings they never expected. They did not plan for them. They did not anticipate them. They could not have predicted them. Yet those unexpected blessings often become some of the most meaningful parts of their lives. This reveals something important about God. He is not limited by human imagination. He is capable of creating opportunities beyond our expectations. He is able to provide solutions we never considered. He can accomplish things that seem impossible from a human perspective. The problem is that people often become attached to specific outcomes. They decide exactly how God should answer their prayers. They determine which door must open. They identify which person must stay. They focus so intensely on one possibility that they overlook countless others. Imagine a child asking for a small gift while a loving parent prepares something far greater. The child may become upset because the desired gift has not arrived. Yet the parent understands that something better is coming. The delay is not punishment. It is preparation in many ways. Believers experience similar situations. They become discouraged when God does not immediately provide what they requested. They assume the absence of a specific answer means the absence of blessing. Yet God may already be preparing something that exceeds their expectations. This requires trust, because greater things often remain invisible during the process. People see what has not happened. They notice what has been delayed. They focus on unanswered questions. What they cannot see is the unseen work occurring behind the scenes. Faith thrives in this environment. Faith believes that God's wisdom is superior to human understanding. Faith accepts that unanswered questions do not indicate divine absence. Faith trusts that God's plans remain good even when they remain unclear. Many of life's greatest testimonies begin with unmet expectations. Someone expected one opportunity but received another. They planned one path but traveled a different one. They pursued one dream but discovered a greater purpose. Looking back, they often realize that if God had granted every original request, they would have missed something better. This realization produces humility. It reminds believers that God's perspective is greater than their own. It teaches them to hold expectations loosely while holding faith firmly. It encourages them to seek God's will rather than insisting upon their own plans. Divine purpose is larger than individual moments. It encompasses an entire lifetime. God is not merely concerned with making people comfortable today. He is concerned with preparing them for tomorrow. He is shaping character, developing wisdom, strengthening faith, and guiding them toward purposes they cannot yet fully understand. Because of this, temporary disappointments must be viewed within a larger context. A closed door today does not mean God has forgotten. A delay today does not mean God has abandoned his promises. A challenge today does not mean God's plan has failed. Sometimes the very experiences people would choose to avoid become the experiences that prepare them for future blessings. Difficult seasons teach perseverance. Uncertainty teaches trust. Waiting teaches patience. Loss teaches dependence upon God. These lessons are rarely pleasant, but they are often essential. When believers begin understanding this, they stop evaluating every circumstance in isolation. Instead, they begin viewing life through the lens of God's larger purpose. They recognize that individual events are part of a greater story. They understand that current chapters do not reveal the entire book. This perspective transforms how they respond to uncertainty. Instead of panicking when plans change, they trust God's guidance. Instead of becoming discouraged by delays, they remain hopeful. Instead of obsessing over what they cannot control, they focus on remaining faithful where they are. The beauty of divine purpose is that it never depends entirely upon human expectations. God's plans continue moving forward even when people misunderstand them. His purposes unfold even when circumstances appear confusing. His wisdom remains active even when answers are delayed. What makes this truth so powerful is that it invites believers to live with expectancy rather than fear. They no longer have to cling desperately to specific outcomes. They no longer need every detail explained. They no longer have to understand every step before taking it. They can trust that the God who knows the end from the beginning is leading them with perfect wisdom. They can believe that his plans remain good even when they remain hidden. They can move forward with confidence, knowing that divine purpose is always greater than human expectation. Divine wisdom is always deeper than human understanding, and the future God is preparing is often far more beautiful than the future they originally imagined.